This is Gene Monterastelli, and welcome to the Tapping Q&A podcast, recorded live to tape from Williamsburg in Brooklyn. This is episode 263, originally aired March 21st, 2017. Hi, everyone. I hope this finds you well wherever you are and whatever time of day you're getting a chance to listen to this. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Today's podcast is about the issues to tap on when you are dealing with difficult children. Before we jump into that, first I want to remind you that we have a free 10-part guide where you can use and learn how to use tapping to eliminate self-sabotage. There's audios, there's videos, there's tapping scripts, there's great articles. A number of things have been transcribed as well, so you don't just get them in audio form. To get that, all you need to do is go to tappingqa.com, or if you happen to be listening to this in the website, just scroll up on the right side, click on the big blue button, and you will be able to have that delivered to your inbox every couple of days. I send you a new part so you're not overwhelmed with the content and you can implement it very easily. The first part is a beginning of the day and an end of the day tapping audio. And over the weekend, I was in Charlotte, an event that I was teaching at, and a number of people came up to me and mentioned how much they loved specifically that tool. So if you sign up for the guide, the first email you're going to get is going to have a beginning of the day and end of the day tapping audio. The second thing we need to do is I want to send out a huge thanks to Britta and Esty. They were the two most recent people who decided to support the Tapping Q&A podcast. If you go to tappingqa.com/support, or if you click the link above the little player right there, in the website, you too can support the podcast. You get some really awesome gifts if you decide to be a supporter. And we are 75% of our way to the goal of being able to have all of the interviews transcribed. So for a great conversation like this, if you would rather consume it in written form, you will have the opportunity to do that as well. We're super close to our goal. Today's conversation is with my friend Heather Chauvin. She is a parenting expert, and when I did the reader survey earlier in the year, after clutter, the most requested topic to be covered was tapping for and tapping with children who are being difficult and are misbehaving. And I was surprised by that, but I am a single man who owns a succulent plant that requires to be watered once every 6 weeks, so it's certainly not something that is the front of my mind because it's not something that I deal with day to day. And so this conversation is a little different because when I had originally reached out to Heather, I thought we were going to be having a conversation about tools and tricks and what parents can do to make that communication and can make that management much easier. And it turned into something really different, and it turned into something much better than I thought it was going to. If you listen really closely, what we're going to be talking about are all of the issues in which parents can tap on and how parents can transform themselves when they show up in the relationship as parent, as caregiver, as teacher, as provider. And so she's going to provide you answers that I think are super useful, and they are answers that you are going to find super unexpected. So here is my conversation with Heather. When you're chatting with parents at the workshops that you do, people write into your website, responding to your podcast, what are the most common questions that you are hearing from parents over and over again?
So the most common questions I'm hearing from them over and over again is, I just don't understand my children. I don't understand, why they don't listen to me. I don't understand why, why they do what they do. And I'm overwhelmed as a parent. So I have no idea how to support my own child because I'm over here trying to deal with life, the overwhelm of that, trying to be responsible, make sure my kids are okay. And I just have absolutely no idea where to start. And I feel like I'm drowning.
And so as you describe that, I hear them describing two distinct problems. One is the problem of life in chaos and having too much to do. The second is, how do I respond to my children in a productive, successful way? Do you see those as separate issues, or is it all just kind of mushed together?
I see them as like different levels.
Okay.
So typically when someone comes into my world and they're like, okay, I got to figure this out. The first thing we do is we need to get them at a foundational level kind of set and ready. So I always use the analogy of a house, right? And they say if your house is built on sand, it's not going to be very sturdy, right? So us as parents, women, adults, whoever is taking care of a child, we are the foundation. So if we are not a solid foundation, everything that is built upon this is going to shift. It's kind of going to crumble and not be sturdy. So when you as the parent feel in control, the whole essence of mom is in control is not about controlling your children and other people. It's about when life gets chaotic, you know what to do to kind of get back to square one. So you have to have the emotional strength, the physical strength, mental strength to kind of go, okay, whatever life throws at me, I know how to manage this. I know how to handle this. And then once you kind of got that, you're like, I got this. I feel confident, or I know what I need to do if things come up. Then we can start diving into what is your children's behavior really telling you? Because oftentimes the child's behavior is triggering something within us that we haven't healed or looked into, right? So when I'm asking a parent, okay, what is it that you want? They're like, I just want my children to listen to me. And then they get into the story of yada, 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 yada. This happens and this happens and this happens. And I say, okay, calm down. Let's slow down. What is really going on here? And oftentimes we're so enraged and resentful, and there's so much big emotion around it that we can't even see the real problem that's going on. So we have to deal with the emotions before we can actually see clearly, if that makes sense.
It does. So it's really interesting in the answer that you gave there. We're having this conversation in a lot of ways because I had lots of people saying, how do I be a better parent for difficult children? And what's interesting in the answer that you shared there is before you even said we're going to respond to our children in a particular way, the first thing you said is we need to be in a circumstance where we're in a good resource state, that we need to be taking care of ourselves and doing a lot of personal work. And I can see how, as parent, wanting to do stuff for children and doing that and putting yourself second, but needing to put yourself first and taking care of yourself. And then the second piece of it is recognizing that the parent is having an emotional response to the situation that they need to deal with before they can even deal with the situation itself. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I've worked with you personally, Jean, and your tools are so amazing for identifying that. But one thing that I like to point out to people is because there's a lot of shame around parenting and blame. I was just listening to an interview, I don't know, yesterday or something. They were talking about, I think it was like the Dalai Lama was talking about parenting in the Western world and how selfish it is. But yet we believe we're being unselfish by giving every last drop in our cup to everybody else. But yet that's actually very egotistical, right? Because it's like, it comes from a place of ego and not from a place of like the internal state of being, if that makes sense. But this duality of my children's behavior is a reflection of me, or their emotional state is my responsibility, all of this stuff, we have to look back and realize that our children are having their own emotional experience, and their emotions and our emotions are two separate things. Even though they're connected and they play off of each other, my child's anger is not my anger. But if I don't manage and deal with my anger, my child is learning from my emotional state. So I see as parents, we are leaders, we are teachers, we are coaches. The second you say yes to having a child or caregiving for another human being, you are taking on this responsibility not only to provide for them, but you are their life coach pretty much. And I don't think we're taking that responsibility to heart, because what we realize is that we are their teachers. This is how they learn from us. So if I don't know how to manage my own anxiety, and this was my biggest aha moment as a parent when my oldest son, who's now 12, when he was 4, and his anxiety was out of control. And I worked in mental health at this point, Jean, and I had no idea how to support him. So when his anxiety was out of control, it was a big aha moment for me. Oh, I don't know how to help you or even show you how to manage these emotions because I don't know how to manage them myself. So the second I kind of took back control of how do I manage my own anxiety, then I could teach and guide him. But it was by his personal experience that taught me, oh, geez, I'm not even practicing this tool myself.
So how then do you, when you're working with parents, or do you recommend parents get them to a place where they're able to start separating that out and being able to analyze that? Because in the moment, when we are in the middle of our emotions, regardless of the content, working with a child or not, we're so engrossed in those emotions, that's all we can see and that's all we can experience. How then is a parent to kind of peel that back and start to name where they're, for lack of a better word, lack of skill to manage their own emotional experience? How do they process that and figure that out?
Yeah, that's a big question. That's a big question, and it's a lifelong journey, right? One, it's self-awareness, because we have to watch and observe how emotions process in our own mind and our own body. So for me, it's often very physical. For each one of my children, it's very, very different. So the self-awareness, having that communication, not only with yourself, but with your children, anybody, like, what are you feeling right now? What's going on, right? A lot of people say nothing, or they want to run and hide from these big emotions. They want to avoid it, or they want to project it onto other people because you're trying to get rid of it. But actually where the magic happens is sitting with the discomfort. So let's just say I wake up with anxiety, right? And I'm like, oh, what's going on? The first question I ask myself is it true? I've taken this from Byron Katie's work. If anyone knows her, or thework.com, she's magical. But I ask if I have this thought process going on in my mind of like, oh, this is going to happen or that's going to happen, I stop. I feel what I'm feeling fully. So feel the anxiety. Where is it showing up in your body? Feel that. And then ask yourself, is it true? Is that conversation in your mind actually true? And if the answer is, I don't know, or the answer is no, then I keep asking myself that question. Is it true that this person doesn't like you? Is it true that you were mean to this person? Is it true that you're not going to have enough money? Is it true that your child's going to end up this way? So you start to inquire about these actual emotions that are showing up in your body. And so this is why I'm a huge advocate for meditation, but actually just stillness. Like, is this false? Is this fear? What is it? And what is diving deeper than that? So a lot of what I teach for parents is to intuition, because when you get down to the core essence of who you are as a human being, that's where this confidence comes from. So if you're the parent that likes to parent this way and everyone else is telling you to do it the opposite way, but this feels really good to you and everybody flows and the family gets along this way and it works for you, there's no reason why you should deviate from that. But oftentimes what happens is we start living our life from a place that isn't in alignment with our core essence. And when we do that, we're actually living from the emotional place. So when you can just get still with yourself and say, what part of me is true? What do I need? What actions do I need to take that feel good to my core? Not because I'm anxious or I'm afraid or yada, yada, yada. Does that make sense?
It does. And as you're describing this, and I'm scribbling little notes here, I'm kind of getting this kind of thing that is built around me here, that it's almost like this gobstopper, the way that they're those candy shells. And on the outside layer is this sense of just general overwhelm that we experience. And the first thing that we have to do is we need to deal with just general overwhelm. Once we've done that, it gives us the opportunity to start being very specifically aware of what our experience is. And then once we are aware of our emotional experience, then the next layer in is doing the work that we need to do to deal with that emotional experience. Like you were talking about, finding out if it's true, if it is, doing work on that. If it's not true, figuring out what really the trigger is. And it's just fascinating anytime we're talking about this. I want to be better at caring for someone else. And so far, our entire conversation has been about us taking care of ourselves so that we are in a better resource state before we can step in to even consider doing that.
Well, I just had a little aha moment because it's all mirroring, right? Mm-hmm. We're constantly projecting. So right. If you want to be a better caregiver for someone else, reflect that back on yourself.
Right.
I need to be a better caregiver for me. Because when you're a better caregiver to yourself, you've walked your talk, right? So when your child comes up to you and says, I am so afraid, and you can recall a time when you were terrified, but you took the steps, you then know how to educate your child or hold space for them. But when you're leading from a place of, oh my God, you're afraid? Now I'm afraid. Oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. And then you're just like, well, let's just be scared together. You're actually not being that safe place for your child. So this is why I always say self-care is the greatest gift you will ever gift to your children. But too often our mind gets fixated on, my child has ADHD. Great, but who is your child, right? Like, we need to watch where the mind gets fixated on these things and ask ourselves, like, is this helping the whole child? And why do we need to get rid of that label?
And it's interesting as you describe that self-reflective thing is that, and it's almost cliche that we dismiss it to the point that it's like this bumper sticker quote that our children learn what we do, not what we say. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I spend all day chatting with clients and looking at their beliefs about the world. And many of the beliefs we have about the world are the beliefs that we pick up from our parents, because they're this place where we are just predisposed to learn from. And the number of lessons that I am helping my clients let go of, that they have learned from parents that are no longer useful, because the parents were passing these lessons along because they weren't in a good state, or they weren't emotionally equipped to deal with what was going on. And they were doing the best that they could, but didn't realize the lesson that was being passed on to the next generation. And recognizing it's not just, I need to be taking care of myself so I'm in a good resource state, but by taking care of myself, I'm actually teaching my children how to be in this world. And that's such a fabulous point.
So when you say that, my first reaction is, wow, I'm screwing up my children.
Right. And that's a fear that we want to run away from. And yeah, so talk to me about that.
Yes. So, I don't really have that fear anymore, but it's funny because the fear will pop up because I have 3 boys. So the fear will pop up and go, oh my gosh, what beliefs am I passing down to my children? Right?
Yep.
And then the second thought that I have is, well, you're doing the best that you can, right? Mm-hmm. But it's funny to observe and watch my children because I can see a lot of times it's like they want my permission. Like, Mom, what do you want me to do? So the greatest thing is when you have the self-awareness of, I'm going to pass down these beliefs to my children. Like, it's inevitable, right? Like, I am their role model. Mm-hmm. So what I do is I just try to teach my children to be independent thinkers. I always go back to that. There was that movie, The Pursuit of Happiness, where Will Smith was talking to his son. And he said, don't ever let somebody take your dream away from you, not even me. And it was so powerful because it was like, don't ever let your parents stop you from becoming fully self-expressed. And on a daily basis, my children are challenging me who I think they should be, right? I'm like, if you want to be this person and I want you to be this person, I got to work on my stuff so that I could just clear the way so that you can be this person. So kind of the essence of what we're saying here is this fear of, well, what if I'm not good enough for my children right now? But you are you. And I see parenting as a baton. So I tell my children all the time, I'm going to screw up many, many times. And I'm doing the best that I can right now. And I'm also doing the best to break generational patterns and in the way I was parented and they were parented and all the way down. And I'm just doing the best. So I'm going to pass the baton on to you. Take what I did good and keep using that, and then improve on what I lacked and keep going. And I'm like, that's the best I can do. That's all I can do right now.
As you say that, I remember a very specific experience with my father. I was 21 years old. It was between my junior and senior year of college, and he happened to be passing through the town where I was doing a summer internship. And as we were having lunch, he started telling me what I needed to do with my life. After I got my computer science degree, I would get a job, and then I'd go get an MBA, and I'd move along. And in the middle of this statement, he literally stopped himself, and he took both of his hands, and he kind of just, you could see him like grabbing his words and stopping himself. And he looked up at me and he said, "You need to do what makes you happy." And it was two really specific lessons inside of that. The first was this lesson of recognizing that going and pursuing what makes you happy, that's a really good thing. The other really important lesson was my father was recognizing that he was taking his definition of happiness and was passing it on to me. And in the middle of that statement recognized, okay, I want all of these things for my son because I want my son to be successful and happy. And I have just pinned in this definition of success as this very small thing based on my worldview and my experience. And I need to be able to let go of that. And so him being imperfect in that moment and watching him learn through that moment was as powerful of a lesson for me as it was the permission to go do what I needed to do and create the life that I wanted to create. And so he didn't have to be perfect in that moment and did a fabulous job of modeling what it's like to interact with another human being.
That's beautiful. And there's so much there, right? And when you take the pressure off yourself as a parent to know all these answers for your child, that's emotional freedom right there. I don't know what I'm doing. Right. And people go, "Oh, you're the parenting expert." I go, "No, I'm just somebody who has a passion for continuously learning and growing and evolving." But every day, I think it's more important to be able to hold space for your child when they are having a tantrum or they are so angry and outraged, or when they are so terrified and they need to make a decision. Being able to hold space for somebody who's going through that and not having the answers is a blessing.
And so what I'm hearing in all of this is, one, we need to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves and we're a good resource state. Two, that we're in a situation where we are continuing to do our own healing work to make sure that we're just, and it's just being good humans in the world, not just good parents. And then three, as we're navigating all of this, to continually strive to be better and at the same time to be easy with ourselves and recognize the fact that what we have is enough as long as we're showing up fully present, and it's going to work out without us having to be perfect as we navigate that.
Yeah. There's so many things. It's so complicated, but just remembering that being human means you are constantly healing, and your children above anything else. I mean, marriage, children, and owning a business, if you're avoiding something, it will definitely come up on your journey. So your children are just here to help you and show you where you can heal as well.
The other thing that I really like about this is, we anytime that there's a question that shows up from clients or in my inbox about, how do I do this thing to fix this other person? Right. The place that we have the strongest locus of control is who we are, how we act, and how we respond. And that's the way that we make the biggest difference in the world and the biggest difference in other people's lives. And it's not that we're responsible for them, but it's the place that we can make the most transformation, and it allows us to create landscapes for other people to make new choices as they navigate the world as well.
Yeah, for sure. And the second you turn it back on yourself and say, how do I fix this within myself? You're helping that other person heal as well. So if we can't, I was talking to a woman about a week ago. She was trying so hard to help a family member. She's like, "I can't fix her, Heather." And I said, "But you're doing the same thing that she is, right? She's trying to fix you. You're trying to fix her." I said, "What if you guys just try to fix yourself?" Mm-hmm. And that's how you heal the world. It's just turn the mirror back on yourself and say, what part of me is reflected here, and how can I work and do the work myself? Because that's where we find the resistance, is doing the work on yourself.
For the longest time, I actually carried a big pink eraser around in my pants pocket. Mm-hmm. And the reason I did was it was a reminder that all of my work is about releasing and erasing away the lessons that I've picked up that are no longer useful for me. And that was it. Like that is the sum total of my work. And if I consistently do that work of letting go of these lessons and these stories that are no longer useful in my life, then as I act in the world, it's going to be easier for me to act in a way that I'm happy with. And making the right choice is going to lay bare obviously in front of me because I'm not going to be having these extra emotions that I'm fighting through to make a good choice.
Yes. And as soon as you said this, I thought, that's probably why I'm not a huge advocate for parenting books. Mm-hmm. Right. Because it's like, it's telling you a script of how you should show up and what you should be and the research behind it. And like, just take the big eraser and erase it and go, how do I want to show up? How do I want to feel with my child? What feels good to me? Yeah. And start living from that space.
Awesome. Well, as always, Heather, thank you for your time. I love that.
Thanks, Gene. I love being here.
So even if you aren't a parent, the advice and disposition that Heather is sharing there is useful for all of us. That the place that we start in all of the relationships that we show up in is making sure that we have taken care of ourselves, that we are emotionally clear and we are well resourced, so that when we are in situations that are unexpected, we have the resources to make the good choices that we want. Heather has a podcast that has over 160 episodes. It is called Mom is in Control. You can find a link to all of Heather's information, her website, her resources, as well as her podcast by going to tappingqandapodcast.com and click on link for episode 263. If you happen to be listening to this in the website right now, just below the player, you will see all of the links. If you happen to be listening to this in the Tapping Q&A app, which you can download at tappingqandapodcast.com, or if you are listening to this in any other podcatcher, if you go to the show notes, you will see a link to all of Heather's stuff. You'll also find a link to become a supporter of the podcast, or you can go to tappingqanda.com/support. If you have a question, a comment, a guest that you'd like us to interview, a topic you'd like us to cover, please send me a note. Or if you just have some feedback on a past show, I love hearing from you. There is an episode coming up based on what we did in episode 261, where there's this huge amount of feedback that's going to create a really awesome episode for the future. I've already done the interview, and that's because someone just like you reached out and shared a resource with me. You can do that by clicking on the contact link in the website. You can email me directly at Gene, Gene, at tappingqanda.com. Or if you have the app, just click on the contact button. You can send me a message, or you can even leave me a voicemail through the app. If you know someone who could use today's podcast, please be our advocate. Pass it along. Don't spam your inbox and send it to everybody in the world. But if there's someone you know who could use this information, please pass it along. They will thank you and their life will be better. For the Tapping Q&A podcast, this is Gene Monterastelli. I hope you have a great day, and I will talk to you real soon. Bye-bye. The Tapping Q&A podcast is copyright Gene Monterastelli, Tapping Q&A 2016. All views expressed by guests are those of the guests and not necessarily of Gene Monterastelli or Tapping Q&A.